Hi, and in this video we're going to look into post-processing inside the universal render pipeline inside Unity engine. We'll take a look at how we can add post-processing in your scene, and then we'll look at how we can add post-processing to specific cameras. My name is Anand, and let's get started. Shout out to Lolly Play Guitar for suggesting this video. We will be using low poly medieval market by Vanilla Art, and we'll be using the modular first person controller by G Case in this video. Let me open up the medieval market demo scene, and right off the bat I'm going to delete the post processing so that we can start fresh, and I'm going to uncheck camera so that we can add our first person controller and we'll drag it onto the scene. So now if we play, we can move around in the scene like this. Alright, you don't need to install post processing package for URP. It comes along by default as long as you have URP installed. If you want to know how to install URP or how to set up your existing project to use URP and even learn some lighting tips, take a look at the video at the top right. Thank you. Alright, the first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the camera of the player. So we're going to choose the player camera here and make sure we go to the camera, rendering, and make sure that post-processing is checked. This makes sure that there will be post-processing effects that will be rendered on this camera. Okay? Cool. In URP, we use volumes to add post-processing to areas in our games. We can right-click volume, and there are two types of volumes. We have a global volume and we have local volumes. And the way we add post-processing inside URP is by having one global volume of 0 priority and add effects that we want consistent inside those global volume and add multiple local volumes which will have additional effects that will be specific to a certain scene or specific to a certain camera. Both we'll look at in this video. So first we'll create a global volume. Let's call this global volume. Why not? We can change the mode here back to local if we want. The weight slider decides how much of post-processing effect is added to this volume. I recommend keeping the priority at 0 for the global volume. And we can create a new profile here. Make sure to click the new profile. And then we can add overrides to this volume to add various effects. So just for this example, we'll have a couple of effects that will remain consistent throughout the entire game. The first thing that I would like to add would be tone mapping. We need to check this and then change the mode to aces. Right off the bat, you can see a bump in the contrast of the image. You can see that these blues get really, highly saturated. There's also a bit of contrast that's been added here. The second thing that I'd like to add would be bloom. Let's check threshold, intensity, and scatter. Increase the intensity so that we have a little bit of light. That's just blooms. And then play around with the scatter value so that we have a good effect. I will mess around with the threshold a little bit so that there's a lot less bloom on the sky. That looks fine. So these are the two effects that will remain consistent throughout the entire game. Now we can add local volumes by right-clicking volume, and then we can choose any one of these. The best option would be to have a convex mesh volume. So you can create a mesh inside Blender itself. Let's say you want post-processing on this area. You can create a mesh inside Blender or anywhere and then use that convex mesh as a volume. Alright, just for accuracy purposes. If you can get away with a box and a sphere, make sure to use that because that's less resource intensive. So right-click volume. I like to use a sphere volume. Let's call this danger PP. I want to cover this market area with the volume. You can also see that this is a local volume and it has a sphere collider attached and it is a trigger. And we can just increase the radius to have post-processing effects inside this radius. The most important thing that you need to remember is to have a higher priority than the global volume, which is 0 by default. So if we set this to 1, whenever the player enters this trigger, this will be additive to the global volume's post-processing effect. Alright, if you want this to work as an override instead, we need to set the weight value of the global volume to 0 via code. Alright, that's the way to do it. So let's create a new profile. It's called danger PP profile. We can add an override. Let's assume that whenever we enter this area, there's a boss or a demon chasing us or something. Let's assume that this is a chase scene. Obviously, it doesn't look like one. I want to make it feel like everything's going red and you're in the rush. I don't know. I'm just assuming and blabbering at this point. So I like to add a vignette And let me choose the color to be something like this. Let me change the intensity to something like 0.7 so that it's a lot more obvious at first. And the way we fine tune this is by actually playing the game. And because this is an asset, all the values will be saved. So we can enter this area and you can see that the vignette appears. And we can play around with these sliders to get that desired effect that we want. Okay, this looks cool. So if we go out of play mode, it still saves because this is an asset, which is pretty cool. So once again, if we enter this area, you can see that Unity actually blends both of these together. You can still see that there is a little bit of bloom and the Ace's tone mapping is still there. All right, cool. So that's how you add volumes to a specific room or an area in your game. This effect only works when the camera actually enters this collider. And you can see that Unity automatically blends the post-processing effects when we enter and exit the local volume. So the effect only gets applied when the actual camera is inside this volume. All right, just keep a note of that. Now, to add specific post-processing effect to a camera, we can use this concept of local volumes and then simply add it to a camera. For example, you may want custom effects for, let's say, a cutscene, or maybe things like security cameras and stuff like that. So for this example, I'll disable this first person controller and then enable the camera. The easiest way is to add a volume component to this camera. It will be local. We need to add a collider to this camera as well. So we can hit fix and then add a box collider. If your camera is something that is actually in the scene, you can then hit is trigger so that it does not collide. And of course, you can edit this collider to actually be very tiny. All right, you can make it extremely small. As long as the position of this camera is inside the box collider, everything will work. Make sure to have a priority higher than the global camera. Let's add a new profile and let's just add a color adjustments, probably go to saturation and then reduce saturation to -100. If we have the first person controller and if we disable the camera, we can see that the first person controller has separate post-processing effect. Meanwhile, the camera would have a separate post-processing effect. We cannot animate these overrides, but we can actually animate the weight slider. So we can set this to 1, go 10 seconds later, we can set this back to 0, and you can see that the post-processing gradually fades in and out. So that's post-processing inside URP in a nutshell. So you create a global volume and you create multiple local volumes with a higher priority, and then you add overrides to it, whatever you like. There is no right and wrong way to add overrides. You can just play around with all of these. So if you want to learn about these post-processing overrides, the best way would be to actually learn video editing. That's how I've learned a lot of these things. So things like lift, gamma, gain, color curves, basically shadows, midtones, and highlights. All of these things are an important aspect of color correction. I use DaVinci Resolve for video editing. So if you want to learn a lot of these things, I would recommend spending some time in Photoshop. You can also learn it from image editing as well, or you can go for video editing to understand each of these post-processing effects, because you need to spend a lot of time to actually understand what is going on. And I'm not that intelligent enough to teach you all of those things. I just play around with it and just go with what I like. All right, that's my process. But I do go with tone mapping and bloom in URP. Cool. Yeah, so that's it for post-processing in URP. I hope this video was useful. If you're having any troubles with URP post-processing or anything, leave a comment below. I'll try my best to answer them. And if you have any suggestions for the next video, please do comment down below. And yeah, that's it. Take care, see ya, and bye-bye.